Hello and welcome to Skyline's second episode tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Driti Atri. Well, I want to start with a very simple question. How close is the entire world to another major conflict here? Every single day, we wake up to headlines about missiles, warship, fighter jets, military alliances, and rising tension. One day it is Iran, the next day it is Israel, and then the United States steps in, and soon after, Russia, China, Saudi Arabia becomes part of the entire conversation. Suddenly, what looks like one regional conflict begins to involve half of the entire world. And that is exactly what we are witnessing today. In today's show, we'll bring you 10 major stories from across the globe. Some of tonight's stories, it will raise difficult questions. Some will reveal how quickly global alliances are changing, and some will remind the entire world that today's geopolitical decisions can affect millions of people far beyond the battlefield. So, without wasting any time, let's start with it. Can you imagine being in the middle of the Arabian Sea? Well, hundreds of kilometers away from land, the weather can change within minutes. The sea is unpredictable, and suddenly, a military helicopter is forced to come down in the water. Well, that's exactly what happened during a routine US Navy operation. An MH-60S Seahawk helicopter operating from the US's H.W. Bush aircraft carrier, it made an emergency landing in the Arabian Sea. 4 American service members were on board. 3 were rescued safely and now reported to be in stable condition, but unfortunately, one sailor, he is still missing. But you know, that single missing crew member, it has become the focus of a massive search and rescue operation. The US Navy has deployed helicopters, warships. In fact, they have deployed surveillance aircraft across the entire region. Every passing hour is critical because survival at sea depends on several factors here, including weather condition, sea current, and how quickly rescue team can locate the missing person. The whole incident has immediately attracted international attention though, not just because an American military helicopter crashed, but because of where it happened. The Arabian Sea is one of the world's most strategically important waterways. It connects the entire West Asia with the Indian Ocean and serves as a key route for global trade, emergency supply, and military operation. American naval forces have maintained a very strong presence over there for several years to protect shipping lanes and support regional security missions. Naturally, whenever a US military aircraft goes down in the region, speculation begins almost immediately. Well, the questions are, was it an accident? Was it a technical failure? Or was there something else? The US Navy has tried to answer those questions quickly though. Officials say that there is currently no indication that hostile forces were involved here. According to the military, the emergency landing, it does not appear to have been caused by the enemy action, though an investigation has already begun to determine what exactly happened. You know, that statement is important because the timing of this incident, it could not have been more sensitive. The West Asia remains on the edge. Although large-scale fighting has reduced in recent weeks, military forces across the region continue to remain on high alert. American naval assets are still operating near some of the world's most sensitive maritime routes though. Diplomatic efforts involving Iran and the US continue while security that remains extremely fragile there. So this means even a routine military accident immediately becomes part of a much larger geopolitical conversation. In the meantime, military experts say that the helicopter operating over open water always face unique challenges. Unlike airports, there is no emergency runway in the middle of the ocean. Pilots must rely entirely on their training, aircraft system, and quick decision making. So if a helicopter is forced to land on the water, every second matters. The aircraft can become unstable, strong waves, it can make rescue operation extremely difficult, and locating missing personnel, that becomes race against time. Well, that is exactly why the US Navy has launched such a large-scale rescue effort. For the families of the missing sailor, well, every phone call matters, every update brings hope, and every passing hour feels longer than the last one. Around the globe, military personnel do understand this reality better than anybody else. Behind every uniform is a family waiting at home. Behind every rescue mission is a promise that no soldier will ever be left behind. Tonight, that promise is once again being tested in the waters of Arabian Sea. And as investigators work to determine what exactly caused the emergency landing, the immediate priority remains finding the missing American service member and bring the rescue operation to a successful conclusion here. But yes, this particular story does not end here. Right when we are talking, fresh details have emerged about what exactly happened during those dramatic moments before the helicopter entered the water. And those details make this whole incident even more significant here. Just a few moments ago, we told you about the missing American sailor and the massive rescue operation taking place in the Arabian Sea, right? But now more details are beginning to emerge, and they help us understand just how serious and dangerous this whole situation really was. According to the US military, the Seahawk helicopter was carrying 4 crew members when it suddenly encountered an emergency during the flight operation. The pilots, they had no choice but to make an emergency landing in the Arabian Sea. Well, fortunately, 3 crew members, they were rescued quickly and they are now reported to be in a very stable condition. However, 1 crew member, he remains missing, and rescue teams, they continue searching across the vast Arabian Sea. In the meantime, military officials say that there is no indication that emergency forces were involved. Maybe they are talking about Iran. But at the moment, investigators believe that this was an emergency landing rather than an attack. But that has not stopped the questions from being raised across the world. You know why? Because timing matters. The incident happened at a time when American military forces remain heavily deployed across the West Asia. Although active fighting has reduced in some areas, but American naval forces continue protecting important shipping routes, monitoring the regional security, and supporting military operations across the Gulf. So that means every military incident, it immediately attracts global attention. Now the Arabian Sea itself, it is one of the busiest security waterway in the world. In fact, thousands of commercial ships passes through this particular water every year, carrying oil, natural gas, goods worth billions of dollars. It is also an important area where American aircraft carrier regularly conduct military operation. In fact, the USS George H.W. Bush, from which this helicopter was operating, is one of the United States Navy's most powerful aircraft carrier. It carries fighter jets, helicopters, and thousands of military personnel. In fact, every operation launched from such a carrier, it follows detailed planning and strict security procedures here. And that is why an emergency landing like this one is considered a serious event. Military aviation experts say that helicopters are among the most difficult aircraft to operate over open water. Unlike fixed-wing aircraft, helicopters depend on constant rotor stability here. Even a small technical problem, it can quickly become dangerous. And once the aircraft reaches the water, well, the challenge becomes even greater. Helicopters often become unstable after touching the sea. Strong waves, powerful currents, poor visibility, everything works against rescue team. And that is why the first few minutes after the water landings, well, it is considered as the most critical one. The US Navy immediately launched helicopters, rescue swimmers, surveillance aircraft, and nearby naval vessels to search for the missing sailor. Every search pattern, it is carefully planned. Every radar signal is examined, every possible location is checked. Because the goal is simple here, bring every service member home. And yes, at the very same time, investigators have started examining what have caused the emergency here. Well, was it a mechanical failure? Was there a technical malfunction? Did changing weather condition play a role here? Or was it simply an unfortunate incident during routine operations? Those answers will only become clear after a detailed investigation. Until then, the search operation remains the Navy's highest priority. All around the globe, millions are now waiting for just one piece of good news, that the missing sailor is found alive. Because beyond every military headline here, there's always a human story. A family waiting, friends praying, and the entire rescue team refusing to give up their hopes. But yes, while America is searching for one missing sailor in the Arabian Sea, another story is creating headlines inside Israel. A leaked report now claims that one of country's most important energy facilities suffered far greater damage than previously believed. Just a few moments ago, we spoke about emergency involving the US Navy in the Arabian Sea. Now, let's move to another development that is creating fresh debate across the West Asia. This time, the focus is on Israel. Well, during the recent Iran-Israel conflict, both the nations claimed success. Both governments assured their people that they remain strong. Both sides released official statements highlighting military achievements while downplaying the damage that they had suffered. Right? But now, a leaked document is creating fresh speculations here. According to reports, a draft document allegedly linked to Israel's interior minister suggests that Iran's missile strike on Bazan oil refinery in Haifa, it may have caused far greater damage than what was publicly acknowledged. If these reports are accurate, several important facilities inside the refinery, including gas turbines, in fact, steam boilers, electric system, and major fuel storage facility, they were seriously damaged during the attack. Think why this matters. The Haifa refinery, that is not just another industrial complex. It is one of Israel's most important energy facilities. It supplies fuel used by industries, transportation network, and other essential sectors of the economy. Any disruption at such a strategic installation, it can have long-term economic consequences. According to the leaked report, ladies and gentlemen, one of the large fuel storage tanks were damaged so badly that it may not be repaired further. In fact, the document also claims the refinery's ability to produce fuel at normal capacity, it has been affected, and the complete reconstruction, it can take several years. And if that particular assessment proves correct, the financial impact, that could be a lot. Reports suggest the damage may run into hundreds of millions of dollars. However, it's very important to remember that these claims are based on leaked documents that has attracted widespread attention, and different accounts of the extent of the damage continue to circulate. In the meantime, military conflicts are no longer fought only on the battlefield. They're also fought through information. Every country wants to project strength. Every government wants to reassure its citizens, and sometimes the full picture becomes clear only after weeks or maybe even months. And that is why analysts say that leaked documents, satellite images, and independent assessments that often become important in understanding what really happened during the conflict. Well, for Israel, protecting critical infrastructure, it has always been a national priority. In fact, power stations, air bases, ports, refineries, and communication networks, they are considered very important because they keep the country functioning even during times of the war. So when any one of them is damaged, repairing it becomes both economic and strategic challenge. Now, this whole incident also reminds us how modern warfare has changed. Today's missiles are far more accurate than ever before. Instead of targeting only military bases here, they can also threaten economic infrastructure that supports an entire nation. And that changes the nature of conflict itself. The reported damage at Haifa, it has therefore sparked fresh discussion about defense experts, about infrastructure protection, missile defense system, and the growing vulnerability of strategic energy facility. Well, as more information emerges, investigators and analysts, they will continue examining the true extent of the damage. But one thing is definitely clear here. The economic cost of the war often continues long after the mission stops. The economic cost of war often continues long after missiles stop flying, because rebuilding critical infrastructure, it is never easy. It takes years, it costs billions, and it affects ordinary people far more than most realize. But yes, while Israel is assessing the reported damage from Iranian missile strike, another important development is unfolding elsewhere in West Asia. One of America's closest regional partners has reportedly refused to support a major US military operation. And that particular decision, it could have serious consequences for the future of the United States and Saudi Arabia's relationship. While missiles may damage the buildings, but diplomatic disagreements can reshape the alliances. And that's exactly where our next story takes us. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go to Saudi Arabia straight. Just a few moments ago, we spoke about the reported damage caused by Iran's missile strike inside Israel. Right? But now, another development is raising even bigger question about the future of America's relationship in West Asia. Well, the story, it's not about missiles. It is about diplomacy. And sometimes, diplomacy can change history more than wars itself. Well, according to reports, Saudi Arabia refused to allow the United States to use its airspace during a proposed military operation linked to the tensions with Iran. In fact, reports also claim that President Donald Trump and several senior American officials they made repeated efforts to convince Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. But according to these reports, Riyadh decided not to support the operation. Now, if these reports are actually accurate, then this would be a very significant development. Why? Because for decades, Saudi Arabia has been considered one of America's closest strategic partners in West Asia. The two nations have cooperated on defense, energy, regional security for many years now. And that is why this reported decision has attracted so much attention. Here, many analysts believe that Saudi Arabia is trying to avoid becoming directly involved in another regional conflict. In fact, the kingdom has spent the last few years focusing on economic reforms, foreign investment, and long-term development projects. In fact, another military confrontation in the Gulf, it could threaten those plans. And that is why Riyadh appears to be following a more cautious foreign policy. Instead of choosing sides openly, Saudi Arabia means to be trying to reduce tension wherever it is possible. And this also reflects how West Asia has changed over the last few years. In fact, countries that once depended heavily on military alliances are now thinking about economic stability. They are thinking about tourism, international investment, and regional cooperation. No government wants another conflict that could disrupt oil market, trade routes, or maybe investors' confidence. Now, for the United States, however, the whole access to friendly airspace, it has always been an important part of military planning. Military aircraft require carefully planned routes. Operations depend on logistics, in fact, support bases and airspace permission. Without regional cooperation here, even powerful militaries face additional challenges, and that is why reports of Saudi Arabia's refusal have generated discussion across diplomatic circles. It also shows that even close allies do not always agree on every single issue. International relationships are rarely black and white. Every country ultimately makes decisions based on its own national interest. Saudi Arabia appears to believe that avoiding any direct involvement here, it could currently save them from further violence. Now, whether that particular position changes in the future, that remains to be seen. But one thing is definitely certain. The balance of power in West Asia, it continues to evolve. And yes, every diplomatic decision, it now carries much greater importance than ever before. But this particular disagreement may not end with airspace alone. Fresh reports now suggest that Washington could even reconsider its military presence inside Saudi Arabia. And that takes us to our next story, ladies and gentlemen. When allies begin disagreeing, questions naturally flow, right? The question is, could America's military relationship with Saudi Arabia now be entering a completely new phase or not? Now, for decades, American troops have maintained a significant presence across West Asia. Their roles have included protecting strategic interests, supporting allies, and helping secure some of the world's most important energy routes. Saudi Arabia has long been one of the key pillars of the regional security network, but today, that relationship appears to be facing new questions. According to recent reports, disagreements over the Iran crisis, it has created fresh diplomatic tension between Washington and Riyadh. Following Saudi Arabia's reported refusal to support the proposed US military operation, discussions have now emerged about whether the US could actually reconsider the size of its military presence inside the kingdom. Now, it's very important to remember that no official decision has been announced yet, but even these reports have attracted global attention. And why it is attracting so much attention? Because any change in America's military footprint inside Saudi Arabia, it could carry major strategic consequences. Here, American military bases, they are not simply buildings filled with soldiers. They serve as logistics center, training facility, command headquarters, and rapid response location for operations across the Gulf. So any reduction, it would naturally raise a lot of questions about future security agreements here. Military experts believe that the whole West Asia is entering a new phase. Regional countries are increasingly trying to balance relationship with multiple global powers instead of depending entirely on one partner. Saudi Arabia today maintains Dialogue not only with the US but also with China, also with Russia and several other neighboring countries. Well, this more balanced foreign policy gives Riyadh greater diplomatic flexibility. But if we see it from Washington's POV, then maintaining strong regional partnership that remains extremely important. The Gulf continues to be one of the world's most important, strategically significant region. Contains major shipping route, important military bases, and energy infrastructure that affects economies around the globe. And that is why every diplomatic disagreement it is carefully watched by the global planners. In fact, some experts believe that these reports simply reflect temporary differences over one particular issue. But here others believe that they may signal a much broader shift in regional politics. Well, only time will tell which assessment proves correct. But what is another thing that is clear is that today's West Asia that looks very different from the one we saw just 10 years ago. In fact, countries are making more independent foreign policy decisions. Regional alliances are becoming more flexible and traditional partnerships are constantly being revalued here. Well, for ordinary people watching these developments, the message is definitely clear. Global politics never stands still. Relationships do evolve, interests do change, and diplomacy remains just as important as military power. But yes, while diplomats continue holding meetings inside the government offices, another challenge is unfolding on one of the world's busiest sea routes. Fresh reports now speak of another security incident near Yemen. And yes, let me tell you here, once again, international shipping finds itself under constant pressure. Just right now, we spoke about changing relationship between the US and Saudi Arabia, right? But while diplomats, they continue discussing strategy inside government buildings, another challenge is quietly unfolding at the sea. This time, the focus is on the Red Sea, one of the world's busiest shipping route, basically a place through which billions of dollars worth of global trade passes every single day. And once again, that particular region is making headlines. According to maritime security reports, another merchant vessel operating near Yemen currently faced a tense security situation after several armed boats reportedly approached the ship. Well, as soon as the crew realized something was wrong, they immediately followed emergency safety procedures and moved into ship's protected safe room. Now, that particular thing is known as Citadel. The United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Centre controlled the whole situation while regional authorities continued tracking the whole development. Now, fortunately, everybody on board remains safe. But this latest incident, it has once again reminded the entire world that waters around Yemen remain highly sensitive. Well, for months now, the Red Sea has become one of the most closely watched maritime routes in the world. Commercial ships, oil tankers, container vessels, and military warships pass through these waters every single day. Well, that is because the Red Sea connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Indian Ocean through the Suez Canal and Bab al-Mandab Strait. If shipping is disrupted over here, the impact is felt across the entire world. Prices increase, trade slow down, insurance costs rise, and the global supply chain that comes under constant pressure. And that is why every security incident, it immediately attracts international attention here. Well, over the past few years, attacks and attempted attacks on commercial vessels, it has forced several shipping companies to change their routes. In fact, instead of passing through the Red Sea, many vessels have chosen to travel around Africa. But that particular journey, it's much longer. It consumes more fuel, it increases transportation costs, and ultimately, consumers around the globe end up paying the higher prices here. Well, security experts believe that protecting the international shipping that has now become one of the biggest priorities for several naval forces operating in the region. Warships from different countries continue patrolling these waters. Surveillance aircraft monitor suspicious movement. Merchant vessels remain on constant contact with maritime security agencies. Even so, the risk has not disappeared. But this latest incident, it also comes at a time when diplomatic efforts between Washington and Tehran continue. Every new security alert, therefore, creates fresh speculation. Could regional tension rise again? Could shipping once again become a target, or will diplomacy succeed in reducing this risk here? Well, at the moment, nobody has a definite answer here, but one thing is definitely clear. The Red Sea remains one of the world's most strategically important waterways. what happens here that affects not just the West Asia but economies across Asia, Europe, Africa, and beyond. Let's be honest here. In today's interconnected world, a security incident involving one ship, it can eventually influence businesses and consumers thousands of kilometers away. But yes, while concerns continue growing over maritime security, another powerful message has emerged from a very different stage. Well, this time, Russia and Iran have come together, and not on the battlefield, but at the public event focused on children affected by the conflict. And this particular story, it has now sparked global discussions. Well, war is fought through weapons, but diplomacy is often carried through powerful symbols. Well, our next story is about one such symbolic event involving Russia and Iran here. Just a few moments ago, we spoke about growing tension in the Red Sea and how one security incident can affect the entire world. But our next story, that is very different. This time, there is no missile, no fighter jet, no warship. Instead, there are children, there are candles, there are messages of peace, and yet, behind this emotional event lies a powerful geopolitical message. Well, recently, Russia and Iranian officials came together in Jakarta, Indonesia, for a public event dedicated to children affected by war and conflict. The program included lantern-making activities, peace messages, dove-shaped balloons, and memorial corners where participants remembered children whose lives have been affected by violence. Diplomats from both the nations addressed the gathering and spoke about the importance of protecting future generations from the horror of war. At first glance, this may appear to be an ordinary humanitarian event. But let's be honest here, in geopolitics, nothing is ever that simple. The timing of this program, it has attracted a lot of attention because it comes at a time when both the nations continue facing pressure from the West. Now, whenever two nations organize a joint public event, and that too during a period of geopolitical tension, analysts naturally begin looking for a larger message behind that. Well, for Russia and Iran, this event was not only about remembering children, it was also about representing themselves as countries, calling for peace, dialogue, and humanitarian concern. Both the governments have repeatedly accused the United States and its allies of contributing to instability in different parts of the world. At this particular event, that therefore became another opportunity to reinforce that narrative before an international audience. Children, they often become the strongest symbol during times of conflict. They are innocent, they have no role in political decision, yet they are often the ones who suffer the most. Homes are destroyed, schools stop functioning. In fact, families are separated and entire generation grow up knowing only conflict instead of peace. And that is why events focused on children receive so much international attention. They speak not only to the governments but also to the ordinary people watching around the globe. Well, for Indonesia, which hosted the program, the event also reflects its long-standing support for peaceful dialogue and humanitarian cooperation. For Iran and Russia, it provided diplomatic a platform here. And for the international community, it serves as another reminder that behind every geopolitical crisis are millions of ordinary families trying to live very normal lives. Now, whether countries agree or disagree politically, everybody accepts one simple truth. Children should never become victims of the war. And that is perhaps the only point the entire world will agree to. But yes, while Russia and Iran were speaking about peace, another country was witnessing growing anger within its own borders. This time, the spotlight shifts to Israel, where thousands of people are demanding answers from their own government. Sometimes, the biggest challenge for a government does not come from another country. It comes from its own people, and that is exactly where our next story is going to take us. Just a few moments ago, we spoke about Russia and Iran using a humanitarian event just to send a political message. But our next story takes us to Israel, where the biggest debate is no longer coming from outside the country. It is coming from within. Nearly 1,000 days have passed since the Hamas attack of October 7, 2023. It was one of the darkest days in Israel's modern history. In fact, hundreds of people lost their lives. Many were taken hostages, entire communities were left devastated. Even today, the pain of that day continues to shape Israeli politics and Israeli society. Now, as Israel marked this painful milestone, ceremonies were held across the globe to remember those who died. Families gathered to honor their loved ones, while leaders paid tribute to the victims. But alongside those emotional moments, another powerful message was heard on the streets. Thousands of Israelis are now asking difficult questions. Could more have been done to prevent these attacks? Were intelligence agencies adequately prepared for that? Did the government respond quickly? Well, these questions have not disappeared with time. Instead, they have grown louder. Ladies and gentlemen, reports say that protests were held in Jerusalem where demonstrators demanded an independent investigation into everything that happened before, during, and after October 7th attack. Families of hostages also continued appealing to the government, saying that they still want answers and hope that those remaining in captivity will eventually return home. And this shows something important about democracies. Even during time of war, citizens continue asking questions. Governments continue facing scrutiny and public debate never completely stops. In fact, former military leaders have also spoken publicly about the need to carefully study what exactly happened so that similar security failures can be prevented in future. In the meantime, supporters of the government, they argue that Israel faced an unprecedented attack and has since taken strong military action to defend itself. However, critics, they believe accountability is equally important. They say understanding past mistakes, it is essential for improving future security. These two opinions now exist side by side inside Israel itself. And that is why the political debate that remains intense. The October 7th attacks that changed the country forever. They reshaped national security policies, they influenced military operations, and they continue affecting political discussions almost every single day. And yes, beyond politics, there are thousands of ordinary families still waiting for closure. Now, many continue hoping that missing relatives will eventually return. Others simply want answers about what happened. For them, this is not just another political issue, right? This is deeply personal. And perhaps that is why emotions remain so strong even after all this time. The story reminds us that while wars may begin with weapons, their emotional impact often lasts for years maybe. And rebuilding public trust, it can sometimes be even more difficult than rebuilding damaged cities. But yes, while Israel continues debating its past, another major power is preparing for the future. And this time, focus shifts from West Asia to Asia. Because China has just showcased a military capability that is now attracting attention across Indo-Pacific region. Just few moments ago, we spoke about political debate inside Israel. Now, let's move to another major power that is making headlines with its growing military capabilities. And this time, it's China. The Chinese military has released fresh visuals showcasing its YY-20 aerial refueling tankers, basically an aircraft designed to extend the range of fighter jets, bombers, and other military aircrafts. In the meantime, defense experts, they say that this capability allows Chinese aircraft to stay in the air much longer and operate farther away from their home bases. Well, it also strengthens China's long-range military planning across the Indo-Pacific region. In the meantime, military experts believe that YY-20, it will play an important role alongside aircraft such as H-6N bomber, which is capable of carrying long-range weapons. Together, these platforms, they improve China's ability to conduct extended operation if it is required. And this particular development, it has naturally attracted a lot of attention from countries across the region, including the US and its allies. And yes, as China continues modernizing its armed forces, every new capability is being closely watched. However, defense experts also pointed out that showcasing military technology, it is often part of strategic messaging. Countries use such display not only to strengthen their armed forces but also to demonstrate capabilities and deterrence. One thing is definitely clear, the competition between major global powers, that's no longer limited to economic growth. It now includes advanced military technology, artificial intelligence, naval strength, and power. And as that competition continues, the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific will remain one of the world's most important strategic questions. Well, from growing military competition in Asia, let's now return closer to home. where another long-running dispute between India and Pakistan has once again taken center stage. Water has always been one of the world's most valuable resources. In fact, civilization has risen because of rivers. Countries have prospered because of water, and history has shown that when water becomes a political issue, the consequences can last for decades. Ladies and gentlemen, today one such issue has once again returned to the headlines here, and we are talking about the Indus Waters Treaty. Well, for more than 6 decades now, this particular agreement has governed how the waters of Indus River system are shared between India and Pakistan. It has survived wars, military standoffs, and years of political tension. And that is why it has often been described as one of the world's most durable international water sharing agreements. But now, that particular treaty is once again at the center of a major political confrontation. Here, India's decision to suspend the treaty, it has triggered strong reaction from Pakistan. Political leaders there, they have warned that any disruption to water flows, it could have serious consequences for millions of people, particularly farmers who depend on the Indus River system for agriculture. In response, India has maintained that national security concern and cross-border terrorism, it cannot be separated from broader bilateral relationship. This shows that the issue that's no longer about rivers. It's about diplomacy. It's about security, it is about trust, and it is about the future of India-Pakistan relationship. Experts say that the treaty was signed during a very different geopolitical era when both the nations believed that cooperation over water should continue despite the political disagreement. For decades, that understanding helped prevent water from becoming another major point of conflict. But the regional security environment has changed significantly. Pakistan is still sending terrorists. Repeated terror attacks, military confrontation, diplomatic tension, and growing mistrust have made every bilateral agreement more difficult to manage for Pakistan. In the meantime, India has reportedly stated that meaningful dialogue can only move forward when this cross-border terrorism is addressed seriously. Pakistani leaders, in the meantime, they continue expressing concern about water security and long-term impact on their economy and agriculture. Well, for millions of ordinary people living on both the ends of the border, the whole issue is not just really simple. Farmers worry about irrigation, families worry about livelihoods, communities worry about stability, because when governments disagree, it is often the ordinary citizens who feel the impact first. Strategic experts, they believe that this issue will remain one of the most closely watched developments in South Asia. Every diplomatic statement, in fact, every policy announcement and every round of discussion will be carefully analyzed by governments around the globe. Well, the coming months could therefore become extremely important for the future of Pakistan. Now, whether both the nations eventually return to dialogue or whether tension continue, that only time will tell. But one thing is clear, the Indus Waters Treaty, it is no longer just a water sharing agreement. It has become a symbol of larger relationship between the two nuclear-armed neighbors. Now, whatever happens next, it will influence not only India or Pakistan but also wider South Asian region. The decision taken by New Delhi will be closely watched by international community because stability between two nations is important for regional peace. Well, as always, both the nations have their own positions, their own concerns, and their own priorities. The real challenge, it will be whether diplomacy can once again find common ground or not. Because history has repeatedly shown that disagreement may begin over borders, over security or waters, but lasting peace is achieved only through dialogue, trust, and sustained engagement. And yes, whatever happened next, the world will be watching very, very closely. And with that, we come to the end of tonight's Skyline. Tonight's story reminds us that the world is changing faster than ever before. I'm Driti Atri, this was Skyline, and I'll see you in the next episode.